please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And if everybody could just stay standing, I'd like to take a moment of silence for Detective Ben Campbell. Thank you. So welcome to Lewiston, the second biggest city in the state, but the state with the biggest heart. And we are here for a budget work session.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor, City Council. I think the first thing that we'll talk about tonight is the nonprofit request. I believe you have two sheets that were included in your packet. One that actually, which is the shorter list that actually had the cash donation request. And then we had the traditional list that we've seen in the past that has the in-kind services. And I know Dennis worked very hard on this, so I'll let him take it over from here.
Sure. We could start with the probably the cash requests we receive throughout the year. So just to give you, I guess, a quick recap of our process. Between the months of January up through March 31st, we're required to receive anybody looking to receive a cash request or in-kind services for an event on either of these sheets has to submit their application and letters to us during that time, and that's what you're seeing here is everything that we received during that period of time according to our process. I believe most of the cash requests are have been repeat maybe from other years. The newest one that I would bring it to your attention on the cash request is the Seniors Plus, which was a result of some of our recent discussions during a CDBG budget, and that request came in just under the deadline after that discussion. I don't think, I certainly have copies of all the letters here. You don't have them with you, but certainly if there's any questions related to each of them, I can speak to those at this point.
So I was not here for the CDBG meeting, but our practice has been not to fund cash requests in the past, correct?
Last year, the only cash request that was funded was the Liberty Festival. You're right on that.
Great, thank you.
And it's been that way for some years.
Yes, right. Thanks.
And no further questions on, is there any? Yeah.
Can you remind me why we take cash requests from January to March 31st if we do not traditionally?
It's not a policy that we don't fund them.
Go out and solicit them. They
Okay.
just come in.
Right.
They come in, so we take them. The reason that we take them during that time frame is so that we can deliver any cash requests to you during the budget process.
Thank you.
So we're getting it in a timely manner, but in terms, as Ed said, we don't solicit them. We just simply bring them to you because these are requests for the City Council.
Thank you. That's helpful.
So if one came in after that deadline, it would just go in with next year's budget request?
Yes.
Thank you.
And if there's no further questions on the cash request,
Oh, Councilor Marquette?
sorry?
Sorry.
Not necessarily the cash request, but the total in-kind.
Okay, that's where I was moving anyway.
So can we get the presentation from Dennis first before?
Oh, he
is
hasn't
that
done the
okay?
presentation yet.
Nope, I can do a quick overview of
That'd be
it,
great.
certainly.
Thank
So again, with the same time frame, we receive any events that are going to be happening in next fiscal year. So that's, after July 1st coming up here. They are required to submit a application with their event and any in-kind services. So basically support from Public Works, police, fire, those types of things. We take those all in, and if they, on their application, indicate that they'd like to seek a waiver through the City Council, that's what you're seeing on this list. So we take all those applications in. We work with all of the staff, all the departments come forward and determine the needs and what it would take to support it. And so what you're seeing on the spreadsheet here is all of the overtime costs. So if there is support, as an example, if Public Works maybe needs to pre-stage some barricades for an event, but that's during normal hours, that would not be reflected in this report. It's work that is additional above and beyond there, and it would actually have a budget impact because there's an overtime component to it. So you're seeing all of the overtime costs there, park charges, and all the permits and licenses that are required through our various processes. And so what you're seeing is everything that has come in through March 31st and is up for the next fiscal year, and your total is there. So I'll take any questions.
Councilor Marcotte?
The $37,317.50, how does that compare to last year?
I can help you with that. And just to make a note, I believe the Central Maine Heart Walk has withdrawn.
Yes,
So
thank
that
you.
brings that total down to 37,115. I'm not sure which iteration you have. Okay, so, and to Councilor Marcotte, your point, this is $1,712 less than the request last year.
And we funded the entire request last year.
Correct.
Okay.
Are there things that are different on this list than last year, or is this,
There may be a few
Could be some
events.
annual
There may
things.
be a few events that are a little different, and that's just, for example, the Central Maine Heart Walk last year had a significant amount of support because their walk was in the roadway, required, closing. They've completely shifted their event, doesn't require as much support. And then to what Heather had mentioned, they've actually withdrawn even their request for the parks. They're not even needing any of those kind of charges. So there's been a few changes like that. A couple of events just don't need the in-kind waiver because they're not asking for support this year, but they're not. So like I said, I would say those are the biggest changes that you'll see, is some of the events are a little different from what they were last year.
okay. Other questions? So I also understand we've got
Yes.
Downtown.
And there is, so as I mentioned, we do have, March 31st is for our deadline for next year, or next fiscal year, but we do have opportunities that come forward and present themselves with events that come outside of that. And when that happens, we need to bring them before you as the city council for approval. So in this case, we have the Trek Across Maine that has announced that they will be coming to Lewiston on June 14th. This is going to bring approximately 1,500 cyclists and about 200 to 500 volunteers to our city. The best part, I think, is also that our Lewiston Downtown Association has stepped up and offered to conduct an event on Lisbon Street. And they are here tonight, and I'm going to ask them to give you a quick overview of that. And then following that, there is some in-kind service requests that they have as well for part to support this event. I'll run through those with you in terms of a cost, and what we would be looking to do is put this on a future agenda for approval. The first part of the approval, just to be clear, anything over 1,000 requires, any possible 1,000 attendance requires council approval, so that's part of the approval that we need. And then if there's a outdoor entertainment, which there is a band component to this, so they will need an outdoor entertainment permit, so that also needs the approval of the city council. And then I guess the third would be the in-kind services being requested. So I'm going to ask Mike Dostie to just give a quick overview of the event and what they're planning, so you can understand what the goals are.
I'm Mike Dostie, the Downtown Lewiston Association, J. Dostie Jewelers. So you have in front of you a very brief overview of what's happening in the community. But the short version, the very abridged version, is the Trek Across Maine has changed their route, and they will be coming to Bates College, and they will be overnighting at Bates College. Riders will be arriving at Bates anywhere from, if they're very ambitious, 10 a.m. To probably 2 in the afternoon. Bates College is not anticipating doing anything to entertain or accommodate them other than sleeping quarters for the evening. So Trek coordinators have facilitated buses to bring trekkers and volunteers from the college to our downtown area. Now, initially, they called a meeting with some city staff, and we were called into that meeting. And their initial plans were to simply bus trekkers to some of the breweries, as that is far and away the most popular thing for trekkers to do, is have a cool beer after a day of riding. So they were anticipating busing trekkers to places like Bare Bones Beer, Baxter Brewery, Gritty McDuff's. But in conversations with city administration, there was talk of closing off a section of Lisbon Street and throwing a large welcome party for this captive crowd. And that's where we came in. The plan that we have, I can get into extreme detail if you'd like, or we can kind of just touch on things. But the short version is we'd be looking at closing a section of Lisbon Street from Ash Street north to Main Street. This is the last block of Lisbon Street. This road closure would start at 11 a.m. Buses would start running from Bates College to this, we'll call it zone, at 2 p.m. That would be the start of this event. At that time, at 2 p.m., we would have amplified music in the street. We would be bringing in 6 food trucks. We would have beer service in Dufresne Plaza. We would be coordinating with the local restaurants to offer specials and open their dining areas onto the sidewalks. We would have live music beginning between 6 and 7 p.m. and the event concluding around 9 p.m. So the interrupt to traffic, we would anticipate from 11 a.m. to approximately 10 p.m. Yeah.
Councilor Lyson?
Well, thank you, Mike, for all your work on that. Sounds exciting. This would be the 15th of June because they're arriving on the 14th, right? So then it's it's that Saturday?
No,
This would be
It's the
Friday, June
Friday.
14th.
It would
They
be
arrive
Fri-
on the 14th.
Okay, so they're arriving, and this event would happen the day they arrive.
That's correct.
So are we going to have plenty of places for them to sit or whatever?
Say
Sit.
again?
I mean,
Places to
it's a long trek. I mean, I don't know how many miles they've done that. you know.
We, in our, I believe it's included in the budget requests or the in-kind service requests, we'll be looking at utilizing some of the city's tables and chairs. Dufresne Plaza is essentially what we look at creating into a beer garden, a comfortable place where people can relax, listen to music, have a beer.
And they've been bussed down there, so they don't have their
Correct.
bikes with them, they're there.
That's correct.
Great, thank you. Thanks for your work.
So a couple things. One, this sounds like an amazing economic development opportunity for our downtown businesses. So I think that that's exciting. In terms of like what you're asking the city to provide, it sounds like we're talking about in-kind services.
Yeah, we're not asking, we will certainly take any monetary donations that the city
We're
would
not
like to
offering,
offer.
but-
However,
But
we would-
as Ed said, we're not offering. But, yeah, I mean, this sounds great. I'm assuming that we'll work with LPD in terms of, shutting down the streets and making sure there's good detours in place for folks.
we had a meeting this morning with the fire departments, the police department, Public Works, the city administration, to go over a lot of the finite details, everything from potential detour routes to number of tables and chairs, things of that nature.
Does this tie in with the art walk at all?
No,
No.
it does not.
Okay. So basically, I mean, this just sounds to me like an extended, really amazing, big art walk in terms of, with
Well, it
food trucks
subtracts-
and live music and a lot more people.
If you took the art out, then yes.
Yes, I mean, there might still
Not
be art.
dissimilar. But a big component of this would be that we would be closing the street
Right.
to vehicle traffic. There would be beer service in the Dufresne Plaza. There would be food trucks. So not dissimilar, but a little bit.
So yeah, I mean, I think that there are a lot of folks on this council who have been talking about shutting down Lisbon Street, Zach Pettingill, for a little while, and I'm really excited about seeing how this plays out, so
Yeah.
yay. Councilor Ray.
Thank you. So I agree, very excited about this. I think, the logistics of getting the truckers down to that area for joining in the celebration it seems pretty clear, but just having a plan for those of us from the community who want to join in on this. Maybe we want to talk about our parking garages and having space available for folks who might be heading downtown, and so they can park there and then walk to the section. perhaps we want to talk about what the rate is, because that is part of our
Isn't it-
charge time from 2 to 6 p.m.
It's free right now, right?
After
Free
six-
after 6.
Yeah.
yes.
Okay.
I mean, it might be good to keep it free for this pilot event.
Just because I think it would be great to
Like-
have
like-
folks from the community there.
Life gets very complicated when we try to do anything that's outside of the system.
Right.
A totally rigid, incomprehensible system that runs
Right.
the garages.
Maybe this is a time to try to be flexible. Just a thought, just because I think we want to have community members take part in such a great event as well.
We could just
Yeah,
take
free
the
is good.
gates off.
Yeah, take the gates.
Rip them
Yeah.
down.
They don't work
Or
anyway,
just open
so.
Thank you so much, Mike.
Counselor Marcotte?
Do we have a number on the
Yep.
in-kind services?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
why don't I go ahead and just address that really
Yes.
quickly? So what we have is the grand total is $3,890, roughly, approximately at this point. What we've done is, obviously, this has been a very quick turnaround, which I have to compliment the Downtown Association in terms of what they came prepared for in this meeting today. Was very detailed, very organized, made staff's job a lot easier to try to turn back around this estimate in a very short amount of time to get this ready. So park fees is about $75. Processing fee for the application is $50. The permits, total permits is about $200, sound amp, food service license, outside alcohol permit. The tables and chairs, $215 roughly is the cost there. Police overtime, looking at about 4 officers at about $1,200 for that, and Public Works is just about $2,265 in overtime. And that's the preparation, barricades, getting everything staged, getting everything ready, but then there's also the cleanup afterwards. We really don't want to leave everything Saturday, Sunday, so just, want to have them come in and make sure that everything looks good for the downtown, the following day. So the grand total is $3,888 at this point.
In terms of number of people, how does this compare to the Dempsey Challenge? Any idea?
This year, it'll be smaller.
Yeah, I think
The
it's.
Dempsey Challenge?
Next year, it'll be big.
So, yeah, I think in terms of numbers, I mean, it's significantly smaller than what the Dempsey
Okay.
probably draws.
Like half?
I don't, maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, you would know.
The Dempsey Challenge will get about 1,200 bicycle riders and
Yeah.
about 2,000 walkers
Okay,
on 2 different days.
Yeah.
So actually, the trek is a bigger
probably,
event
okay.
One bike.
for a single day because there'll be 1,500 people
True,
cycling.
for one day,
Whereas there'd
yeah.
be only 1,200 in the Dempsey Challenge.
Okay.
So I was just looking at, the cost breakdown, so we've got a request for $6,500 for the Dempsey Challenge, and then $3,890, so that seems like they're in line considering the number of folks we're talking about. Councilor Marcotte?
I'm looking at the police and public works overtime as opposed to the other incidentals. It obviously, it's not really a cost to us to give away a free permit if nothing was going to happen anyway.
That's correct.
But police and public works, are there any opportunities for us to generate municipal revenue in an event like this? I heard parking
We could
garage
charge
was
for
mentioned.
parking garage. Right off the top of my head, parking's about it. We aren't in the, we don't sell beer. That would be a good way for us to make money, though. We should think about it. So, pretty much just anything that we might pick up through the parking system would probably be about it.
Councilor Pettingill?
So I am very excited, and I applaud all the work everybody's put into this. As somebody that's spoken for many, many years about the idea of shutting down a section of Lisbon Street, I'm very excited to see this happen, see how it plays out, and the good that it can do for downtown in the city. I would advocate against the free parking. It's a mechanism for us to generate revenue, and it, just like anywhere else, you pay to park, but that's a different conversation. But I'm very excited to see this move forward, and good job, guys. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'd strongly urge the folks to direct people to the Oak Street parking garage as opposed to Saunderville, because Oak Street has much higher, much more space available.
I also assume that Dottie will do some, Facebook posts and make
Oh,
sure
yeah,
we're getting the word out to
we will be
folks as much
happy
as we
to
can.
cooperate with the downtown people to get the information out about the event. If for no other reason than we need to warn people about the street being closed.
That's just.
Yes. Awesome, thank you.
So we may have something on the agenda as soon as, since this event is this fiscal year, we may have something on the agenda as soon as next Tuesday, but for sure the meeting after that.
Great.
So the last kind of group of accounts or divisions we need to go through are the miscellaneous accounts that start on page 76 and continue to 77. Many of these accounts we've already talked about at one time or another, but it just kind of summarizes this last group here. So we have an overall increase here of $388 or $389,000 or 46%. Most of that is in the fringe benefit area that we've already talked about the first budget workshop night. The parochial school busing, which is the first division at the top of page 76, has a slight increase of $1,700 or 2.1%. That all deals, like the transit committee, that all deals with the Western Main Transit contract for the busing. And just as a reminder, we pay for equivalent of 1.5 buses for a 72-day period, and that's about 4 runs per day. The run from St. Dom's or to St. Dom's is 100% paid for by them. That's not paid for by the city. The insurance category had an increase of $157,000 or 3.2%. And again, we've discussed essentially the first several accounts there, potentially the first dozen there, but the non-fringe related insurance accounts had an increase of $4,000, and that is all due to the auto insurance of about $9,250. We do have reductions in liability and property coverage, but clearly the cost driver, and I met with MMA representatives yesterday, and they reiterated, right now our experience rating in our automobiles, we need to do a little bit better. Are some improvements there in order to kind of bring that back down.
Our Public Works Director has guaranteed he will do that.
And it's not just Public Works.
The police department has a role in that, too.
There we go. So, again, all of those coverages are provided through the Maine Municipal Association. We're part of their risk pool there. They do return dividend checks to us on an annual basis. Usually those come out in late summer, early fall, right around September-ish. As a reminder, this year, our dividend check was $32,140 or $41. So clearly, our overall positive experience rating is favorable.
Yeah, because that dividend check is based on our own experience, so they're giving us some bonus, in effect, money back because our general experience is good, other than automobile.
Correct. And just as a reminder, we tend to forget, or I tend to forget, the inland marine coverage covers our movable equipment that is not considered a vehicle. So, just that odd coverage there. And the boiler coverage is now included in or incorporated into the property coverage. The retirement, which is in the bottom section of page 75, had an overall increase of $228,000, or 7.3%. Again, we reviewed most of that. We do have a kind of an increase, a double whammy increase with Maine PERS, where we have a slight increase in the employer contribution, as well as the general increases in wages covered by Maine State. So you have that. We also have an increase in severance as we're seeing, the increase in retirements that we've been anticipating are now here. Workers' comp, which we have discussed, is at the bottom of page 76. We have an increase here of $221,800. Again, that is closing the gap on our unfunded portion. So we'd like to put some more money into that. Dues and donations, which falls on the top of page 77, has a decrease of just shy of $5,000 or 6.2%. Our dues into the Maine Municipal Association represents all of the decrease. We had a significant decrease there, and we are budgeting to pay $28,179 to the Maine Municipal Association as membership dues. The other component that we pay for is the Androscoggin Valley Council of Government, or AVCOG. We pay $26,750 there, and that is flat funded from the current year, so there's no adjustment there. We spoke about the donations. Right now, the only cash donation in the budget is for the Liberty Festival, and as a reminder, that pays for FY21's Liberty Festival. It's almost a year in advance. In case council wants to make any adjustment, it allows a whole year's notice to be evaluated. And we did increase our contribution to the Liberty Festival by $1,400 back in FY17. Also included in this account is the required flags for the cemetery during Memorial Day, which is just shy of $5,800. And then we have, for a number of years now, turned over the state share of our snowmobile registration, which is $6.62 per registration. We turn that over to the Hillside Snowmobile Club for their efforts in grooming and so forth. We estimated an increased registration there, so we are looking at providing them about $4,200 in this next year's budget. We've already discussed the in-kind nonprofit request, which falls in there, so we'll move on to the tax sharing, which is in the middle of page 77. Right now, it's flat from the current year at $183,000, but that's contingent upon the final tax rate. So that gets adjusted at the last minute once we know where we are kind of processing or where we stand with the budget.
And most of that relates to the dams?
Yep.
Cost sharing arrangement or the tax sharing arrangement we have on the dams?
Yes, it's the Monty Hydro. We pay
Correct.
17.5% of that based upon the $36 million value of that. Salary reserve, which is in the middle of that page, we have, it's a decrease in the credit of $167,500, and again, that was already reviewed as far as the first workshop, but just as a reminder, that has a credit balance based upon the three utilities, water, sewer, and stormwater, paying the general fund for our overhead cost and like city administration, treasury, and so forth. And then the last category is the other miscellaneous. We have an increase there of $3,000 or 6.5%. The other fees in this area include the annual audit at $26,385. This is the final year of a 5-year contract that we have with R.H. Smith. They had, when they bid on the audit, they bid this same $26,000 for all 5 years. So I anticipate this time next year we will be seeing an increase in audit services. It also includes actuarial evaluations as required by generally accepted accounting standards. So we have $3,700 there to do those actuarial evaluations. Typically those are on other post-employment benefits as a result of, like I said, the accounting standards. It's one of those things, even though I'm in the profession, I don't exactly agree with everything that they do. The miscellaneous service category increased by $2,500, and this is to fund the department kind of specialty charges, if you will. If we do recruitment efforts, if we have like a city-wide training session, those all tend to be commingled into this account. And then the office equipment, which is the only contingency, if you will, for the whole city for equipment replacement, is $12,000, and that has been moved out of the budget into the fund balance listing, if you will. And at that point,
Counselor Wright.
So under miscellaneous services here, is that where the employee appreciation, the new program request would come in?
if we did that, we could either, in the past, when we had it as part of the budget before, it actually fell under human resources, but we could put it here as well.
Okay, that's helpful, thank you.
Counselor Markgraf.
At the beginning of your presentation, you said something about the category is a $389,000 increase.
Yes.
Where are those two numbers?
What's driving those two numbers?
Yeah, because
So we have the overall insurances had a $157,000 increase. And then the workers' comp and unemployment,
okay, I guess I'm looking for a line at the bottom, and I just realized that the last line is the entire budget.
yes.
Yes.
And the line above that is where you'll see it.
But that's more than 389,000. Difference between 9.58
And
and
8.7.
8.8.
8.8.
Let me double check that then. It may be because of the credit. I will
Yeah,
double,
the credits back then were 254 versus 86.
yes, so I think that's
That has
missing
a
that
big
total.
impact.
But I will double check that and send that email out.
This is all of them. This is everything.
So at this point, I am, and you are, all done hearing about kind of the detail of the individual divisions. Also slated for tonight's discussion, I passed out Tuesday night, the new positions that were included in the base budget, which there were two, as well as all of the new program and service requests for personnel services. So if you look at the kind of those two pieces, the two positions that are currently in the budget total $216,444.
Sorry, can you just show us which sheets?
Oh, I'm
you're-
sorry, it's the sheet that
Yes.
I passed out Tuesday.
Thank you.
I passed it out at the end. Councilor Marcotte, do you have yours?
Yes.
Okay. And then the new program and service requests for the current year totaled $728,553. That's just for positions only. Doesn't include services, supply, all the other categories. So at this point, I guess I would turn it to the council how you'd want to approach this.
Counselor LaJoy.
Wasn't it mentioned that the fire inspector's wages may not all come out of the fire department?
No, they would all be out of the general fund and budgeted in fire prevention.
I thought you had made a comment either the last meeting or the meeting before.
Well, there was, the one comment I made about that is that got added in the budget very late. So
Okay.
all it represents is the person's costs, the staff person's costs. There may be some ancillary costs that we have not picked up in terms of, other equipment, supplies, things that individual might need, so.
Okay.
Councilor LaJoy, you may have been thinking that if we were to charge for the rental registration program, that might be a funding source.
Okay, that's possible.
But that was early on, but
Okay.
right now, as it sits, this is just part of the fire department's
Okay.
budget.
Yeah, that makes sense, thank you.
So can I just, one of the things, sorry, I have a lot of papers here.
It's okay.
There's one on here that gives a breakdown for the rental registration
Yes, it's on the
program.
back, it's on the back of the memo that has the tax rates
Okay.
at the bottom.
So because this is the first year we're doing this program, I'm just interested in which pieces, so I understand that there's some data collection that needs to that there's data that we need in order to sort of launch the program that we may or may not actually have.
If you, I know I just gave this out today, but if you look at the fire inspector description.
Yeah.
This, the language down there, the justification down there came pretty much out of the actual language of the rental registration report. And basically, it indicates that the committee's looking to us to set a goal to inspect all 3-unit and larger properties within a 3 to 5 year cycling frame. The committee recommended that once we had adequate data available to determine what the actual inspection cycle currently is, that we should consider adding another fire inspector. So I think the notion here is, and this is partially my own thinking, I'll be real honest, is that we need to get a better handle on what we're actually doing these days and what our current inspection cycle is, so that we can determine the need for any additional personnel. You know, clearly it wouldn't hurt, I mean, if you were interested, we can find stuff for that person to do, because the notion is that he would pick up the routine, ongoing, proactive inspections during the period of the year that the engine companies cannot because of the weather. So we certainly have stuff to do, but we right now don't, I think, have a really good handle on what cycle we're currently on, how many inspections we're doing. I'd really like to know how many of those inspections are rectified quickly through the engine company inspections, how many of those have to be either forwarded on to fire inspection for follow-up, for failure to comply, how many of those get sent over to code if they're significant enough to be a problem. So all that data would be helpful. So I'm not saying we couldn't use the position right now, but I'm also probably saying it wouldn't be a terrible problem to hold off for a year. You always get concerned holding off for a year, we'll never get it. That's also another consideration, so.
I mean, I'm just looking at a list of 10 to 12 positions that we have
I
on here,
understand.
totaling almost $750,000.
The other two things that came out of the rental registration program is a recommendation that the code enforcement folks get tablets so that they can do their work out in the field. And that's one of the new program requests for $16,160. That's tablets, the application that they need to connect those tablets into our EnerGov system, and the data plans that are necessary so that they can communicate while they're out in the field. And then the other one that's related, I will also note that this did not come in initially for this purpose, is the assistant city clerk position. Kathy made that request, I think, based on her current workload. I think it may be possible to get some additional work out of that position, plus have that position deal with rental registration. I think the startup of that program is going to take some time, but I think once the program's up and running, hopefully that would not be such a burden that that position couldn't help out trying to deal with some of the other workload in the city clerk's office. So I think it would be hard for us to get this rental registration program off and running without that kind of clerical
Administrative support, right. Heather, are the tablets something that can come out of fund balance?
Both the tablets and the software could come out of fund balance. The actual data plans would need to be in the
Right, 'cause those are
operating budget.
ongoing. Great. Councilor Lyson?
Yeah, as a member of the rental registration committee, if we're even going to reach our benchmarks of 3 to 5 years, we're going to need an additional fire inspector. I think it was clear to the committee. And I do think that certainly, when I saw the assistant city clerk here, Kathy, how does this address, I mean, can you address, I know your request, and you made a nice report about staffing changes and where you're at, but do you see that as a possible, that they could handle the incoming rental registration stuff and then also do the stuff that you're looking to do as well?
We hope so. I don't know. I haven't attended any rental registration meetings. I don't really have any information about the rental registration program. We need to schedule a meeting to sort of find out all that information. Ed was describing that the hope of the program, and you can certainly correct me if I'm wrong, but it would be an online-based program where the landlords themselves would be keying in data onto the city's website, and then we would just be monitoring that and tracking for follow-up, but I might be completely wrong on that. We haven't had a chance to sit down and review any of that workload yet.
Yeah, we had a meeting scheduled where we were going to try to talk about some of that stuff, but unfortunately, our deputy city clerk got called into jury duty, so we're in the process of trying to reschedule that.
Councilor Marcotte, as a member of the rental registration committee yourself, I'm wondering what your perception was of the fire inspector position.
Prefer just to go in my prepare. I've been trying to figure out what I was going to say, and hearing some new things here about the particular workload of the city clerk's position. But yes, my idea of the rental registration recommendations and the outcomes were to fund at least the required positions to make the program work and out of the general fund. So I definitely, although I'm reticent to support new positions, the positions that I'm looking at are fire inspector and assistant city clerk. Did have a question about how the numbers were put together, because I didn't realize that we were going to get this handout, which is very helpful. And I tried to do the math myself. But I only counted the $36,224 for the assistant city clerk, not the $48,000. I do see a $12,000 next to it, and I'm not sure how that plays in.
Did you subtract the
I didn't take out of the budget the temporary wages that are now in the clerk's office. So if that was reduced, it would come back to that number.
Okay. So as far as the total number I was looking at just simply changes to a 124,913 instead of, I mean, a 112,913 instead of 124.
Yes.
And I had a question about the handhelds. Would the fire inspector also be inputting data?
Not at the moment, because we're still in the process of transitioning to the fire department's new data system. That's not totally up and running yet, and to be honest, I would have to ask the chief if it's something that could be done through a handheld system. A lot of the inspection stuff that's going to go into that system would be done by the engine companies as well. So, Chief, you might want to comment on that.
Certainly. With part of the new system, they will be able to do handheld. They'll be able to do their inspections from tablets, inspections from street side. We did talk with MIS about having the appropriate data plans and the tablets they could use, but that's certainly part of it. Will they be inputting the data? Long-term would be tablets and things of that nature, replacing part of the MDTs on the truck, so they can also do that inspections and their pieces from a handheld while they're out there. So they can email their inspections right to the person right from then and there. They can track, they can do, and this will go with Ed's point of putting the infrastructure in place that's going to allow us to differentiate all the different types of inspections and follow and track and be able to get a solid number of where we are and be able to shift the workload to where we need it to go. So yes, they ultimately would be, the inspectors would be first, and then the engine companies would be second. So we would hope to have that fully going by this summertime.
So if the cafeteria plan here was to be approved, and we could be looking at a number of approximately 113,000 for this package. What I'm hearing is not necessarily everything would be in place with July 1st.
I think that's probably true. I mean, obviously, number one, if the position is approved, we're going to have to go through the process of recruiting for those positions. And it's possible, but probably somewhat unlikely that we could have them all filled right away. One of the possibilities, I believe, and certainly there'll be some internal applicants for the clerk's position. And if somebody internally is selected for that position, then you have another vacancy you have to go through a recruiting process for. So there'll be some slippage. As you know, the Rental Registration Committee was hoping to see the program kicked off in January. So there's a period of time that we'll have to try to get everything organized and in place to make the program start up.
And when I heard that the landlords would be keying their own data in,
It would be filling out an online form, registration form, and
online
sending it
form.
in.
Okay,
Yeah.
because when I envisioned an individual in the clerk's office, I envisioned somebody who would be doing a lot of data entry for the rental
We're going to
registration.
try to avoid that as much as possible. I will also, as with everything else these days, there are probably some individuals who are not in a position or are unwilling to do that, so there may be some paperwork involved, but I think the majority of folks, if we can get the system set up correctly, could do the entering online, just mail, and send the form in, and we hopefully can then just put it right into our system.
I would hope that if there's a remote data entry process, that there's somebody that's reviewing those before they become part of the permanent record. Because whenever you count on
Right.
people from the outside, you can see all kinds of stuff. I see it all day long.
That's-
The misspells,
Right.
totally wrong information in the wrong field, that sort of thing.
So it doesn't sound to me like the information, even if somebody were to enter it online, is gonna go right from the online entry into our system. It's still gonna, someone is still gonna have to,
Well, we would like to see if we can find a way to make it go right into
Right.
the system so that we don't ever want to re-enter data again if we don't have
of
to.
course.
That's one of the reasons why we were going to sit down with people in MIS and try to see how we could structure this thing. And I know Amy Smith has some ideas,
Yep.
because she's becoming more and more familiar with our data system in terms of some of the projects that she's doing. But that would be my hope. I mean, it doesn't help a whole lot if you fill in an online form, send it in, we print it off and re-enter it into a different system. That's duplicative work, so we'd like to avoid that as much as possible.
Can I just have one follow-up?
I had a question for the fire chief. Excuse me. That new system that you have for software, can you transfer the information that you currently have at the fire station with regards as to all the inspections that have been done in the past, 13 years since I've been gone, but even before then? The reason I ask you that is some of those inspections were done, we'll say 3 years ago. We're looking at a 3 to 5 year window. So if that information is imported into the new system, you don't have to start over again, you know what I'm saying?
Right, yeah, we can, our system, we're initially going to have to start kind of getting all these, all the occupancies and to catch up to what we're doing now. And then, as we kind of moving forward, the goal is to start to backtrack a certain amount of time to get those put into the system, so we can have all that information available over the past 3 to 5 years, so we can stay on that cycle. With that information, we'd be able to say, okay, well, now we know where we are, now we know kind of it sets our future schedules as we move forward. So that all that information would be able to be put in there. We just have, it's going to be just time intensive to do so.
Yeah, I mean,
So that's what
one of the reasons that I'm always cautious about any of the data that's been coming out of the fire department is that they don't have a real system. They're basically tracking this stuff on paper or on Excel files or things like that. So,
Yeah, we had it under, I believe it was Excel,
Right. Right, so
so it would be on spreadsheets.
what we need to do now is take, so for example, right now I'm putting in all the occupancies for the city.
Right.
The issue we have is they're all in different spreadsheets, so I'm having to put them all together, merge them, make sure all the appropriate documentation's right, formatted, then we can load them in. So that's what the time-intensive part is, so we can take all that information. It's just gonna take a lot of time and effort to get everything in order, so we're not duplicating, so when, good data in, good data out, right? So we can make sure that what we're putting in is correct. So that's what the issue, but we'll certainly be able to do that.
Good.
So just to, so we've gotten detailed descriptions of sort of what all of the positions are. I think similar to what we did with the rental registration program, you know, I'm interested in knowing, we talk about the planner position, it says to implement the comprehensive plan, and I'm interested in knowing what projects we have related to the comprehensive plan that that person would be working on. And you don't have to answer that tonight. If that's something you need to prepare, that is also fine, but
Anything and everything. I mean, we are not
so
good at.
let me just preface this. So there are things that go along with the comprehensive plan that cost money, and there are things that don't, right? And so if we're not putting money towards things in the comp plan that we're going to implement, then it feels less pertinent that we have a planner to do those things.
No, understood.
Okay.
And you guys have been good as far as giving us money to implement the plan. As some of you know, that we're just, last night we had our kickoff with the consultant to work on design guidelines and standards. That was a goal of the comprehensive plan, so that's something that we've started to work on. So certainly there are certain aspects of the comp plan that are probably better served by hiring an outside service than having somebody in-house do. And you're right, some of it certainly goes beyond what planning and code enforcement would do. It involves different community organizations, different departments and whatnot. We just really don't have the ability to be proactive upstairs, whether it's on the planning side or the code enforcement side. So if there's a desire by the council for us to be more proactive, whether it's through our department or other departments, we're going to either be looking for additional staff or we'll look for additional funding, so maybe we can hire someone to help us do that implementation. There's plenty of housekeeping upstairs just with our existing ordinances and whatnot that we could spend time on, that we, quite frankly, just keep pushing aside until the time arises where, you know, we have to do something.
I mean, one simple example is if we go ahead with the formation of a housing committee, a new position up in planning might be the position that provides staff support to that committee. I will also tell you that...
That's not a planner. That's not a planner.
Could be.
We're going to pay a planner $93,000 to provide staff support to a...
You said projects. That's not going to be the only thing that person
Okay.
does. That's going to be a very...
Because I was like, that's...
You were asking what this position could do, so I'm trying to give you some examples.
I mean, when I think of a planner, I think of I don't think of somebody providing, I guess, staff time. I mean, when I've served on committees, the people providing staff time are like people, taking minutes at a meeting and not necessarily providing guidance, so...
No, I would say, my experience is that when you have committees and you assign a staff member to it, the staff member needs to be very assistive and proactive in helping that committee define its charge, provide the information that they need, help them with the analytical work that's required. If the rental registration committee had been thrown in a room with a clerical person to take minutes, would have been pretty interesting minutes, but I'm not sure there would have been much progress.
I mean, I'm just thinking about immigrant integration, and I did all of those things myself,
You
so
did.
I'm not sure.
And every once in a while, we run into that situation. Craig Saddlemeyer is what he's
Right.
done with the Complete Streets study, or Complete Streets group. That's one example. I will tell you, it is taking us forever to deal with the marijuana issue. The reason it's taking us forever to deal with the marijuana issue is that they don't have time to deal with it. We haven't done much in way of dealing with sober houses. They don't have time. I mean, David's spending a huge amount of his time dealing with telephone calls from people and dealing with code enforcement issues. That leaves Doug, and in the meantime, you have projects that come in that have to be worked on, such as the Avon Street project. So, I mean, will we ever get it done? Yes, but do we lose opportunities because we do get it take so long?
I'd like it to just take the opportunity as well, and I believe Ed and Heather mentioned this during the presentation for our department, but there was reference to also a code enforcement position that is funded through CD, and how that funding won't be available for the next fiscal year. I just want people to be mindful of that, because quite frankly, I'd rather have a code officer than a planner, given the challenges that we have in the downtown. If we're going to do any type of rental registration, we're not even, I mean, I could see us coming back with not only a fire inspector, but a code officer if we're truly going to be proactive with this. So while I fully believe that there's value in having another planner in helping out on the whole zoning and land use side, because again, we're behind the ball on that. We can certainly be more proactive, never mind the implementation of the comprehensive plan. I'd hate to lose a position in the future as well. It's a conversation for next year, but I really want you guys to be mindful of that.
So can we get a cost estimate on what that code enforcement officer would cost?
Yep.
And I guess just sort of going through this list of positions, I'll tell
Yeah,
you what
let-
my priorities are.
I was going to say it would be helpful because I will tell you that probably all of these positions could be useful and helpful, but clearly we can't afford all of them. And we're going to have to set some priorities, so that's where we're looking at you folks as to what you think is the most important, see if we can come up with something that, at least at this point, which of these positions are we going to keep under consideration?
So for me, getting this rental registration program off the ground is a priority. So that includes the fire inspector position, the assistant city clerk position, making sure that we're funding those tablets and the data plan. We absolutely need those 2 patrol officers. Not for rental registration, but we just absolutely need those 2 patrol officers. And I will leave it at that for now. I also, you know, the senior accountant position, the fact that the general fund impact is such a small amount of the total.
I'm also going to put in a pitch for that position too, because
also
we've
feel
had
like
so much
that's
turnover over in that office. We are going to burn out our finance director, who is now doing work that she should not have to be doing. It's, you look at that turnover list that we sent out, and it's been, there've been some pretty heavy hits on the finance department that have put a lot of extra strain on the employees who are there. We're on the 4th payroll person in 6 months,
Yes.
and we don't have a simple payroll. You know, we've got a complex payroll.
I would highlight the fact that this particular position, we're targeting for the utility billing, which allows us to charge the 3 utilities their portion. I know, and Dale, you can jump in any time as well. You had Kevin here talk about the new meters, replacing the batteries on the meters, you know, changing out that. We do not have the staff to just make those phone calls, do the accounting, changing out the meters, and making sure everything goes right for the project that he wants to take the initiative on.
And I think like many other programs we talked about tonight, the chief talked about tonight, there is a hump. You know, to get over, as Heather said, to get over the hump, to institute it, in the end, it'll be easier, faster, and more efficient, but there is a hump there in Heather's office to get up.
I guess that's what I'm looking at, is a strong infrastructure. And over the years, we've depleted our infrastructure. Some of it was necessary. Some of it we worked in those particular responsibilities to other individuals. In talking to different individuals, I'm finding that some of these individuals that have taken on these tasks are starting to get burnt out. And it's starting to create a problem. We're going to have to, I don't want to say untighten our belt, but the fact of the matter is we have to realize that if we're going to move forward, we have to have the proper amount of qualified individuals that are going to provide that service for us to move the city forward. Otherwise than that, we're just going to be stirring the pot and we're not going to go anyplace. I know it's a hard decision to make. It's an extremely hard decision to make. But I count on the administration, I mean, yourself, Ed, and you, Heather, as well as others, department heads, but your job's extremely important, and you've identified many of those items that need to be looked at. So I guess that's where it's difficult for me to start breaking down some of these positions. Some of them, you know, like in Public Works, the equipment servicer and the equipment mechanics, if we don't keep our equipment in top shape and have the monthly or semi-monthly or whatever it is, inspections take care of the brakes, the oil, and everything else, it's going to cost us more money for upkeep. And I found that out when I was in the fire department with the fire trucks. It would cost me somewhere around $45,000 a year for preventive maintenance. And I was questioned as to why I spent that much money. And my answer was, so I don't spend $500,000 on replacing some other stuff. So I guess without giving you a specific answer, I see a number of items here that I think would be beneficial for us as a city. And then I suppose we could debate whether we should have those or not. You know, I'm still quite strong on the assistant chief's position. I was there. I lived it. One time I had 3 deputy chiefs that took care of 3 departments. And today that's being taken care of by someone else. But the fact of the matter is these individuals were salaried. So there was no overtime involved, which in my sense was a cost savings measure. So I find that, as well as relieving the pressure off the current assistant chief and the chief, very valuable, because then they can do something more proactive to move the department forward and the city forward. I guess that's where I'm at right now. Sorry about the lecture, guys.
You get your turn. You're allowed.
You're quiet most nights, so. Councilor Marcotte.
In a perfect world, every one of these positions could provide value to the community. However, we need to start generating revenue. We're looking at a budget that already exceeds the GNP-IPD factor, and this just adds more cost. That's why I said I was reticent to any of these positions, but I made a commitment on rental registration to the pieces that are necessary there. At the beginning of the meeting, I didn't understand what GF stood for, but finally understood that it was general fund.
Sorry.
It's gluten-free.
Gluten-free.
And that would not be for me.
Could be a metaphor in there somewhere. But I'd like to better understand, and the example was used, I believe, on the senior account. The impact is $16,000 as opposed to $66,000 on the general fund. What does that mean?
That means water, sewer, and stormwater will be paying a portion of that $66,000, since the primary duties will be impacting those utilities.
So the cost would still be there, but it's going to be an enterprise fund that gets
Correct.
a drawdown on its fund balance.
Correct.
I guess I could support that in the grand mix of things, but that's pretty much where I stop.
Sorry, can I just ask a follow-up question? So you're not in favor of the patrol officers?
At the meeting that both chiefs were here, and I think we did CBG that night, if I'm not mistaken, there was some discussion about a number of officers being in reserve duty or having left the service for another career. So the attrition rate needs to be addressed first. I don't believe that we need to add 2 more to the vacancy spots. Not at this time, anyway.
So Chief, since I wasn't here for that, can you address it? Sorry to make everyone sit through it again, but I am the mayor.
We had a discussion where I currently have 3 officers who are reserved, who have just been called up for active duty. So 2 of them are going to be gone until, I believe, February 2020, and the third one, I don't know when he's coming back. We also discussed, I was pulling people back from special assignments. I had pulled someone back from, who was a cadre up at the police academy. He's now on the road. I pulled somebody back from the Maine Computer Crimes Task Force. We've had somebody there since probably 18, 19 years. And instead of coming back to patrol, he decided he wanted to resign and move on to his career. I also have 3 officers that are currently out on sick, and I don't know when they're going to be coming back to work. And that was the discussion we had about those positions.
So the positions are there, but there's nobody.
Well, for 6 of them, I cannot fill because 3 are sick and 3 are on
Right,
military leave,
supposed
so
to
I
come
can't,
back.
I can't fill those positions.
Although we had talked about the possibility of
Filling the one.
overhiring one, using the savings from the 3 who are on military leave, and anticipating that if, by the time they all came back, that position could be absorbed through other turnover in the department. How many other vacancies do you have, Chief?
I had the 2 other ones, and then I'm anticipating another officer's leaving to move to Florida, so I'll have 3 other vacancies.
So just so I'm clear, these are positions that the people aren't doing the patrol on because they're out on leave, but we can't fill them because they're out on leave.
I have not.
So we have fewer people actually doing patrols.
Yes, I have 9 vacancies, and I only can fill 2 of them.
Right, thank you.
Although we have discussed allowing him to proceed with a
the
third.
one.
The other thing you should a couple of things you should keep in mind.
And the city hasn't gotten smaller.
No, it hasn't.
Right.
A couple of things you should keep in mind is, even if those 2 positions were granted, we'd have to take a look at the recruitment period, so that it would be highly unlikely that they would all be filled by July 1st. So they certainly could be phased in. Secondly, in the past, when we've added patrol officers, the way we've managed to do it is through the COPS grant program, where we brought people in and then basically assumed their salaries over a 3-year period. That would be obviously the preferred route to go. At the current time, that program is not making grants because it's been tied up in court challenges over the last round of grants, where the administration attempted to restrict those grants to communities that are considered sanctuary cities. So there have been lawsuits about that decision, and as a result of those lawsuits, there are no grants being made. I'm not sure, I think that's probably now in the courts of appeal, because I think they've heard some at the district court level, at the federal district court level, but nobody knows when that's all going to be resolved. So ideally, that would be the way normally in the past, we've gone about adding additional positions to the police department, is through that program. Nice thing there is it allows you to gradually put them on your budget instead of a big chunk all at once. And then, of course, keep in mind, there's also another police officer position on the list, which is dependent, I think, did the school committee recommend?
Part of our recommendation
Yes,
on
to bring
Monday.
that forward.
It was part?
Yes.
So you also have the 4th school resource officer. So that would be, if you filled all of those, that would be 3 police positions. And Chief, I don't know, at what point in the history of the universe would you be able to fill those positions?
I would probably looking at least a year. It's a matter of getting people at the police academy because there is such a demand to get in there. The police academy is actually going to run 3 classes. There are occasions where we have hire what we call a blue pin, which means someone who's already been trained from an academy, either here in Maine or from out of state. I recently hired a woman from Florida who was a police officer. She's undergoing some training for us right now. So it does happen. Some of these smaller departments, oftentimes their budgets, and they talk about closing, so we sometimes pick up offices from those agencies.
So if we put these into next year's budget, we would start recruiting for them now?
Yes.
Okay. Councilor Lyson.
Thank you. My theme seems to be like boots on the ground. And I too, being part of the rental registration, we support the fire inspector position, and I think if the assistant city clerk can help both Kathy do her job as well as implement rental registration, I know there's some question mark, I'd certainly support that because that program I think is critical to the health, welfare, and safety of the community. Similarly, I strongly support the planner position. You know, being the planning director here for 15 years, knowing that you do need somebody at a lower level to do some of the, the hard work lifting, so you can do some of the big picture stuff. And I know I've been frustrated about the slowness in a lot of the things, but it's like you can only do so many things. I mean, I had a staff of 3 people. Basically, there's one planner in the city and not a lot of other resources. So I strongly encourage us to continue to keep the city planner in. I'm fully in support of the fire inspector position, and I think we don't need to wait to find out if that we need an inspector, and that person can start help building that program up, and I think that will really, really help a lot. And, the police is another boots on the ground type of an issue, too. If we're talking about patrol officers that are necessary to be out there, and I guess your question, Madam Mayor, you said if they're in next year's budget, but this...
Because he said it would take him a year to recruit them.
Yeah, okay, so not this, it would not be in the 20 budget,
Well,
but...
that is next year's budget. So
Okay.
we're working on next year's budget, right?
Well, of course.
Yes,
Yeah.
work on next year's, but I mean, and I really don't like doing this, but one of the things we can certainly do is take a look at potentially phasing in those positions during the year. I mean, if you want those people on the street by a year from now, you would have to get them through the academy.
Right.
We have to pay them when they're in the academy, even though they're not working, so it would potentially be possible to budget that at a somewhat lower level, anticipating that some positions will be vacant for at least part of the year.
Yes, that would be, I mean, best case scenario, I could send somebody to the police academy and it starts at the end of December. More than likely, it would be in the spring of 2020 when we could get some bodies in there.
So if we could get revised numbers on that, that would be great.
Yes, so if you wanted to look at half-year funding or something like that, we could certainly take a look. We can sit down with the chief and try to figure out how best to phase that kind of increase into the budget. And in the meantime, we can keep our fingers crossed and hope that COPS funding comes back.
It's been in injunction since April of 2018, and Ed talked about that, so I have no idea when it's going to happen.
Councilor Pattengill?
So I am in support of the assistant fire chief position. We can't expect the department to operate better if we don't give them the tools to operate better. I'm in support of the planner position, and I went back and forth on this one. I'd like to see us move in a direction of attracting more for-profit businesses and businesses that aren't heavily reliant on TIFs. But, as somebody famous once said, failure to plan is a plan to fail. And if we don't, again, put the tools in place to actively look at what we can do to attract businesses and things that will affect our property tax in a positive manner, we can't ever get out of the glut that we're in. I support the 2 patrol officers as well as the resource officer. To Councilor Marcotte's point, we have 3 members of our community that are in the military. They're serving in our military. That's not attrition. These are folks that up and leave their lives to go serve our country. We need to applaud that. That is in no way attrition at all. And then as far as the resource officer, I've never been in support of putting the new elementary school where it is. I don't think that 5 to 11-year-olds should be on the same campus as, teenagers and pre-teenagers. So I think the resource officer is a good addition to that, as well as the city clerk and or the assistant city clerk and the senior accountant. We need to support the staff that's here. Beyond that, I'm not looking to support the other positions. But that's my take on it.
Councilor Bean?
I'm going to put a wrench in all of this now. I'll make this a lot harder. I support all these positions, and I've been putting initials next to everybody who supports these different positions, and they're all at the top here, and I support them too. But having been on the Public Works Committee, I know that sidewalks don't get plowed if the machines don't get fixed. and that was a big problem last year. And we did not have enough people to repair the plows, and of course, there are some positions here for Public Works about mechanics, equipment servicer. Those are all, and highway workers. Those are important positions. I know they're not as glamorous as a city planner and all of those things, but if our equipment is not kept in shape, first of all, it's gonna break down, and we're gonna have to replace it, and it's expensive to replace it. And secondly, if we've got two non-working sidewalk plows, that was a big one last year, we can't plow the sidewalks, and we need people to be servicing these things. We don't have enough people, at least that's what I was hearing on the committee, to actually take care of the machines that cost a lot of money, that we pay a lot of money for, and that's a service to people. They want their sidewalks plowed, and I don't blame them, because their kids are walking on the sidewalks to school, or we think, and streets plowed. That's really important, and I hadn't heard anybody mention that they support any of this. And I don't know how we're gonna do all this, but I just thought I'd throw it out, that it is really important. It's something that we don't see, but that needs to be done. And we actually need a place where we can store some of these big equipment pieces and wash them off every time they're used. But that's for another year probably discussion, but the workers, I think, are necessary too, and I don't know what to say about that.
Madam Mayor, I think the Public Works Director had kind of evaluated these positions and may have a priority list if you want to. Dale, would you like to speak on that?
Sure. I'm sure everybody's sick of hearing me say I'm new, but I'm still new. So a lot of this stuff was generated before I was here, and it's all good. As Councilor Beam says, it's all ultimately necessary. But given the frame you're in, and knowing where this would probably go tonight, I kind of want to lay a couple maybe priorities for you. The garage, if looking at the garage and looking at my past experience of running the garages at DOT, is very much understaffed. To about half. If you look at national standards, it's about half. We have 5 pure mechanics plus a welder mechanic there, and it really should be between 9 and 11. But I think giving me some time to really get in and understand the balance between what we should be contracting and what we shouldn't. And also just remember, these mechanics are not only working on public works vehicles, they're working on police vehicles, and they're working on fire vehicles. Every one of those, most public works vehicles, is also an emergency response vehicle. They all need to be ready to go. So I guess my suggestion would be, of the 3 positions the garage is looking for, 1 mechanic would be very helpful for this next year, until I have a time to really evaluate the garage and evaluate what can be contracted and what should be in-house. That would bring us up to six mechanics, out of what in the industry would bring us to 9 or 10. So, but there is, and there's a lot of attrition there too. So, training a mechanic and getting them on board. The other position is the split public works position that is in part would work for highways and would be on the 5th sidewalk plow with the new schools and some of the things we need to change this summer. That would be very valuable. The other half of the time would also be available in plow trucks. We're having some difficulty fielding the B team, and we'll be looking at that over this next year as well, and evaluate better ways to field that. But in the summer months, it'll be working for the stormwater district. So it'll be general fund half-time, approximately half-time, and stormwater half-time, and it's really maintaining our stormwater system to our commitments to DEP and EPA. The other thing that it does is Oh, just I lost that thought. Sorry about that. Anyway, so it's part-time on the highway side, part-time on the stormwater side.
Thank you so much. Just jumping in here. So it sounds like police, there could be some massaging of start times and positions to maybe make up for one patrol officer position, but I would be very much in favor of the second, and also the school resource officer, having spent some time with some patrol members recently, asked their opinions and tried to gather a lot of input from them. I think that both are needed, and, you know, folks made a case for both and either, and I just really appreciated them sharing that feedback. I think also on the school side, there was a really good case made at the school level for the school resource officer, so I want to be respectful of the school's recommendation for that as well. I agree with Mayor Cloutier with getting rental registration up as soon as possible, and that to me seems like the fire inspector and assistant city clerk positions would be of the utmost importance. I appreciate Dale's reflection that maybe one equipment mechanic might be good, but I'm curious, what's the difference between an equipment mechanic and an equipment servicer?
The equipment mechanic is a full mechanic, would be licensed to spec vehicles, all vehicles, heavy vehicles, light vehicles, would just be like the rest of our mechanic. The equipment servicer was really a junior member that's mostly would be changing oils, changing shocks, doing those kind of things, pulling some of that routine work off the mechanics. Okay. And again, I guess if there were a priority for me today, not next year, but today, it's really the full mechanic to combat attrition and to get that training.
That's really helpful, thank you. So that would also be something I'd be in favor.
So Councilor Marquette had his hand up, and then Councilor LaJoy.
Yes, since my position was invoked earlier, maybe the word attrition isn't the right word for what I was trying to explain or express. But if we have a number of officers out sick, I'm sure we're still paying base salaries. We have a number of officers out on military leave. Those positions must be held. We're not actually expending salaries. What I don't want to do is add 2 more people so that in a year, when everyone's back, we're actually increasing the budget, not exponentially. So if there is a way to hire a temporary, a reserve officer, I know years ago, and I haven't heard it in recent decades, that we had such things as reserve officers. People who can fill in and do the job, that are qualified to do the job, but are not necessarily permanent to go forward. And that would alleviate a need for a $135,000 impact to a 2020 budget year. That's what I'm having a hard time with, because again, we're already beyond the percentage of our GNP, IPD, and this is just adding and adding and adding. So we need to make priorities, and what it's going to come down to is probably a whole lot of split votes, because I too have been keeping track of who's supporting what, and it's just all over the board.
I can address the reserve officers. We don't use reserve officers, and most departments are going away from reserve officers due to training costs, the ability to even find anybody to be a reserve officer, and then for insurance reasons as well. The city of Lewiston did away with the reserve officers, I think, in the late 80s prior to me coming onto the police department. I did do a little research in regards to number of officers per 1,000 people. Auburn has 2.4 officers per 1,000. We have 2.2. Augusta has 2.9 officers per 1,000. Bangor has 2.5. New England, the average is 2.6 officers per 1,000, and nationwide is 2.8. So we are below the average per officers per 1,000. By adding the 3 positions would make us at 2.3 officers per 1,000. I think we have to be cognizant of the fact that my officers spend a lot of their time in the downtown area. It takes a lot of our resources. And oftentimes I hear complaints from people who live in other parts of the city complaining that police officers, whenever they're in the neighborhoods. My goal is to try to have more officers assigned so that the officers who do patrol Grove Street, Outer Lisbon Street, Outer Sabata Street can stay on the beats and not have to come down and assist the officers or respond to calls in the downtown area. yeah, it would be great if those 3 officers who are out injured were able to all come back to work, but I don't have a timetable on that. I agree with Councilor Ray. I appreciate the fact that she's come on 2 ride-alongs and actually spoke to the officers without me giving them directions. I didn't even know who she was riding with. But the fact of the school, you're going to have, what, about 1,200 kids in an elementary school next to a high school with 1,400 kids. The officers aren't placed in the school. They're not doing discipline. If the kid doesn't show up, they say, go see the school resource officer. I think, unfortunately, the times that we live in, it's a safety issue, and I think that that's something that we need at the schools. I mean, the cost for the SRO is not that expensive, but I'm looking at ways to improve services, and it's based on some of the requests I get from some of you folks sitting here in terms of speeding and other issues. But when I have a domestic that's occurring, I have to pull an officer away from a speed detail or people running through stop signs. I have to, we have to kind of focus on the more violent crimes, unfortunately, that does occur.
There's nothing I detest more than comparing, not that you did it, but comparing a tax increase to the price of a McDonald's meal. But the next thing in line is comparing ourselves to other communities. We are not those other communities. We are Lewiston. And using the word attrition in a proper sense of grammar, we are going to see an attrition of our taxpayers if we continue to turn up the temperature on them and not do something to create revenue in this community to be able to pay for all of our wish list. I really implore that we stop looking at trying to be everything to everybody until we can afford to. We don't have that choice out there in the public and in personal families. We can't just say to our employer, we're going to tax you more so that I have the proper revenue this year to do with the things that I want to do. People out there in their daily lives can't just demand extra money from their employer and get it like the city can in its tax structure.
I'm well aware of that, Councilor Marcotte. I'm just making my recommendations in terms of what I think we need for manpower of the city, and it's up to you folks to make that final determination. I think it's fair to say, compare us to Auburn, where they have 2.4 compared to our 2.2. And an officer or 2 does make a big difference when you're out here on the streets of Lewiston.
Councilor LaJoy, you were next, and then Councilor Bean.
Yes, as far as the Public Works, you mentioned that one of the equipment mechanics could take over the equipment servicer. They could do that job. Would they be able to keep up with the service time? In other words, every 3 months or whatever it is on vehicles that you have to change the oil?
The preventative maintenance. Right now, our mechanics do that.
Okay.
This equipment servicer would have pulled those off some of the mechanics. So currently, the mechanics do everything soup to nuts as it is today.
But the difference now would be an individual that's being paid a mechanic's wage, which is quite a bit higher than a servicer's wage.
Exactly.
So that would be the difference. And so we're paying a mechanic at, we'll say, $45,000 a year, and he's going to do servicing, whereas we could get one for $30,000 or $29,000 a year.
Absolutely. Best and highest use of those mechanics was really our intent there. Is put the mechanics towards the things that they're trained to do, and then lighter stuff. And and there's a training step there too, right? We bring in somebody light. Right. We're having something, and that's a future mechanic as people retire and do other things. So,
and also taking a mechanic off an important job to do that servicing. Absolutely. However, in listening to your explanation, we could actually go with one mechanic, and that would suffice, as hard as that is for you to.
I think giving me the chance to get through the year and see where we are and have this conversation next year, it's better than what we have today. It will help. And adding just the servicer, if we were talking about the whole package, that'd be one thing. But if we're going to add one thing, I would like to add somebody that can do all of the service that we need. And if a cruiser comes in from the police department or something else, I want that person to be qualified enough to give that a good safety check and walk out. someday in the future, when we have if we ever get to a place with a more robust team, then the servicer kind of comes into play at that time, for me, anyway. And I'm sorry, a lot of it's tentative. I just need some time to look at each element of the department and really assess where we are.
Thank you.
Counselor Bean?
I just wanted to follow up on what Councilor Marquez said about comparing ourselves with other cities.
Can you use your microphone, sorry?
I'm sorry. I don't think we do this to try to keep up or to try to do more than we can do, but it's always good, I think, to keep that in the back of our minds, what other cities, or what an average city would do and a similar city would do, so that we can have that goal anyway. We're not going to spend more than we have, but it's always good to have a goal. It's important to keep that in mind.
So would it be helpful for you if we go through the list and do a straw poll of who's in favor of what?
Sure.
Now that we've gotten the updates? Okay.
Recognizing this is a straw poll,
And
not
that we
making
have
a final
we
decision.
have all the money in the world.
No, we don't.
And we don't have all the money in the world, that's for sure.
So currently, the assistant fire chief and the planner are in the budget. Are there people that want to pull that out?
Well, not the plan.
Oh, sorry, assistant fire, we'll do it, we'll just go through individually. Okay, so, assistant fire chief, who wants to keep that in? Planner, who wants to keep that in? Assistant city clerk, who wants to add that in? Am I going too fast?
No?
See, you do agree on something.
Senior accountant, who wants to add that in?
Where are we?
Senior accountant.
Senior accountant. You need that.
2 patrol officers, which actually could amount to the cost of 1 because of the time frame.
Are we
correct?
going down to 1?
Yeah, well, I think
Yep.
we're keeping,
Why don't you just at this point vote on whether you want to increase patrol staffing,
Okay,
police staffing,
yes.
because then we can work with the chief and try to come up with a
and then you can come
a
back to us with
strategy
the
to come back with you.
recommendation. Okay.
All right.
So, increase in patrol staffing. School resource officer. Fire inspector. Dale told us he doesn't need the highway worker.
I think that was his second priority.
Okay, so highway worker.
Okay.
We don't need the equipment servicer if we're doing one of the equipment.
Mechanics.
Okay, so 1 equipment mechanic. Do we
Keep going. Do 'em all.
recreation programmer? Program aide? And library technician. I'm very sorry, library.
Yeah, I am too.
So what do we got? A mess?
What, I suspect what we could do here is with that straw poll, we can come back to you and rank order them with the cost for each position and a running total down the side. That make sense, Heather?
Yep.
Another question. I know there's a proposal that talks about the increase in revenue sharing.
Correct.
That goes up 0.5%, how much that would reduce the tax rate?
So we
Yes,
have to
and
do-
there was a
it's right on
memo
here.
passed out.
I saw that. Yeah. Okay, so that's assuming that 100% of that goes in that direction. And I know both Mike and I participated in a meeting this week of the Finance Committee, and they're going to be, we're going to be sending you a recommendation. And it includes the rental registration piece as a component, because the last couple of years, we've been talking about that. And the fact that it's not in a fee-based system, maybe the city needs to step up. And I know the inspector position is critically important. But, and I, you know, I'm sensitive to Councilor Marcotte's, you know, there's a limit here or whatever. But I think there's some flexibility with there, if we don't assign that all to tax reduction, can there be a component? Because obviously, you know, to me, when I talked about boots on the ground, I talk also about health, welfare, and safety, which is our responsibilities. And knowing how understaffed so many of our departments are these days, I just don't think the services are getting out there. What can we pay for? That's a good question. But again, I think, you know, if revenue sharing, and, you know, I'm just probably more confident than others about seeing a gradual increase in that over the next few years of the revenue sharing. So that, I think, is, and I agree, it's critical for us, if we want more services, to figure out more ways of raising revenue. And this is a revenue stream that we lost. And it should be 5%, and it's not even half that yet. But hopefully it will be. But again, I think we need to be sensitive, but at the same time, you know, some of these departments are just really understaffed. And again, you know, being a bureaucrat myself at one time, I'm understanding you need the boots on the ground. I needed an assistant planner when I was the planning director. You know, people out on the street as police officers or fire inspectors or whatever. I'd lean toward that, you know, component that is where, you know, then people's careers start at a certain point too. So it's entry-level stuff more often than not than on the other end. So thank you.
So one thing I just want to say about the straw poll we just took is that I'm interested in seeing how each of those positions affects the tax rate and what that looks like together. And I'm not committed to funding every single one of those.
We did not take it as a commitment to anything at this point.
Oh, I just wanted that to be clear to the
Yes.
council as well. Councilor Ray.
So to Heather, so are we anticipating any adjustments coming back and impacting the budget? And what's the timeline like for those? I just am thinking to the school budget. We got our insurance adjustment and had $100,000 to work with. So I'm just curious if that's.
They're on a different insurance adjustment cycle than we are.
Okay.
So they have that advantage. I'm looking at, and that goes to the discussion for next Tuesday. Right now, the school budget is, the school superintendent is planning on being here Tuesday to do his revised presentation starting at 6 o'clock.
Starting at 6 o'clock.
Not
Starting at 6 o'clock. And one of the other things I had asked him to do is to kind of review the LCIP items with you as well, the school projects. And then there's time afterwards to start having that general discussion. So I can look at having a list of adjustments ready for that night, but it would definitely be ready by a week from tonight too.
Okay, thank you so much.
And one quick caution, of course, on this comparison that was put out. This is based off of what was in the original proposed budget. And so at that point, as you know, the school department budget was shown in our proposed budget as no tax increase. You're going to have the opportunity to discuss that with the school superintendent next week, because he's now talking about 16 cents?
Yes.
16, he's talking about a 16-cent increase to his budget, so keep that in mind.
So where this says city including overlay, what does that mean? What's overlay mean?
I'll let you, what's overlay?
The overlay is a main thing. It is, since we budget, it has a couple of factors to it. Number one, it's an allowance for property tax abatements that are granted by the assessor during the year if people appeal their tax assessment. And number two, it's a hedge factor against underpayment in taxes. In other parts of the country, people don't necessarily budget 100% of their tax commitment, that they'll actually receive it. They may budget based on anticipated receipts, like at 98%. Here, we budget the full amount, and so that's a hedge against shortfall in tax payments. We generally cover that shortfall by prior year tax payments. In other parts of the country, those are budgeted. So Maine has decided that you should only budget your tax commitment at 100%, not budget your prior year payments for overdue taxes, and give yourself another factor in the budget that gives you a hedge against underpayment if you come in at below 100%, and to cover any abatements that the assessor might grant during the year. That sound like what it
I
is?
agree with that. I'm not sure I like the term hedge, but.
It's a cushion, a
Think of it as
contingency.
a working capital contingency,
Yes.
because we don't collect all our taxes July 1st. So it also provides that cash flow, if you will, to get us up to the September 15th deadline and up to the March 15th deadline as well.
So we
And
have,
we have, I'm sorry, and we have no other contingency.
Yes, correct.
In the
There's no other
budget,
contingency.
anywhere. So if we have a major whoopsie on something like we've had this year, we've had 3 different buildings that have had remediation need. Excuse me, why wasn't going to go that? Just remediation needs, and that was completely an unbudgeted item. So we're trying to kind of find ways to fund that. But if that was something more substantial, or if the winter keeps going through June at this point, you know, those types of things, that it provides that extra contingency that's not elsewhere in the budget.
okay. So the next meeting, we're with the school committee.
Correct.
And then we'll probably come back and look at the list the following Thursday.
I'm hoping to have it, at least I would have it passed out that night for
Okay.
you to at least
Review between Tuesday and
digest a little
Thursday.
bit before
Okay.
Thursday, but hopefully, yes, that's my game plan.
Okay, and that will be items that both we've identified, that,
And then some of my
and
items.
then some of the things that you are able
Correct.
to move to fund balance.
And just one other.
And it will also include the positions that we just talked about.
Exactly.
One other quick reminder, although we spent a lot of time on the additional positions, there are some other budget requests, new service budget requests that we should also spend some time at least going through. Those are on page something like
Councilor Patton?
Page 18.
18. I was going to say 19.
Close.
So, something I just wanted to bring up, because it's come up a couple times now during meetings, is not putting any additional revenues towards property tax relief. I think that is disingenuous to people of the city that are paying for these taxes and these services. You know, Councilor Marcotte tonight talked at length about issues that are coming before the city and how we're not able to pay for all these requests and how they continue to increase in cost every year. While I believe it is prudent to watch the books and control costs and stuff, I also think that controlling that only through the back end is only adding to the issue that we have. If we're not going to be forward-thinking and do something such as drop our property tax, which we all know is a huge factor in why people choose to move to Lewiston and buy homes, start businesses and things of that nature, we're not going to attract more people. So I can't fathom doing anything other than trying to look at this and drop our property tax rate. Because what I just heard was, you know, this is all well and good, but let's not drop our property taxes, and that's insane to me. So I think it's something that should be talked about.
So, a couple things. I guess I would ask how you anticipate doing that, given the 7 positions that we just all raised our hands and said that we were in favor of, and what that would add to the tax increase. Because when I would say, how many positions did we just vote on? Like 9 to add back in there? There were 2 already in there.
Yep, and then there were.
You want to
And
go with
I'm not asking you this question to be a jerk. I'm genuinely asking you this question because I agree with you, and I'm not sure
Yes,
how to
8.
do both of those things.
Well, and I think it's something that begs the bigger question. While I'm probably in the camp that I don't think that the revenue sharing will increase or will continue, for a while. If it's a quick shot in the arm to try and attract people to come to the city, I think we should utilize that while we have it.
Okay, so you're talking long-term, not necessarily this budget.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because without, we keep doing short-term planning and short-term planning and short-term planning, and then we keep running into the same wall. There's no long-term plan, and while I agree that we shouldn't compare ourselves to other cities, other communities, sometimes there is a certain benefit to it, but there's no one reason to say, move to Lewiston, open up a new business in Lewiston. We don't have that one shining thing that says, come here, be part of Lewiston, and that it's something that we need to attract new people. The downtown event is something that's sorely needed, and I think it's going to do a lot of good, and I'm excited to see what it does. I'm excited to see the conversations that it changes when it does do the good things that it promises to do, or that they hope to do. So I look to them to take that lead to change it, but without lowering our property tax, it's something we all know. Without lowering our property tax, we're not going to get anybody new here, and folks will move out because of that.
Yeah, a couple of comments. Number one, I agree with you that the more we can bring people to see the community, the better. So when people come here for an event, that is good for us, because too many people in Maine who live within an hour of Lewiston have probably never been to Lewiston, or have only, been through on the interstate. So I think that always is very helpful. The second thing, it's a good opportunity, as you heard today, the PUC approved the New England Clean Energy Connect project. That project could produce $8 million in new property tax revenue. You can see what $750,000 or $725,000 can do for us. Think about what $8 million could do for us. So number one, I know there's efforts in the legislature to pass legislation that would basically kill the project, so we need to continue to work with our delegation and others to make sure that doesn't happen. And number two, I think we need to continue to get the word out, because as you know, there is a consistent, strong effort to oppose the project that is well funded by sources that aren't obvious. I mean, there's no requirement of them specifying who's funding these campaigns. So if we are, in terms of anything on the immediate horizon, that is a $250 million investment doesn't come along every day. What is Walmart's value?
I don't know, I was doing the impact of $8 million on the tax rate.
Heather's putting together her own list.
Sorry.
But, Walmart, which was a huge project in the 2000s, isn't of that size,
Councilor Marfa, did you?
So what does it do to the tax rate?
Yeah, a number of things. First of all, I like how it went from 6 to 8 million.
Yeah, just so you know, the 6 million that I was using before is just on the converter station. So there's an additional investment with the lines that wasn't included in that original number. So that's CMP's estimate.
And that includes a TIF that they'll probably ask for?
They're not asking for a TIF.
Because I believe Walmart did get a TIF, correct?
Walmart did, but it was primarily used for infrastructure associated with the project and for economic development, right?
It's part of the personal property. Yep.
Right, the personal property goes to economic development, and of course, the state is now eroding the personal property side of that equation through the business equipment tax exemption. Mike actually likes, because he used to have to do that.
The better program?
Yes.
Right now, I'm not having fun. A lot of deadlines and a lot of little numbers to crunch.
Yep.
But hearing some discussion about lowering our tax rate. Last 5 years, and I think everybody got the email, something that I had requested a week or two ago, the mill rate increase over the last 5 years has increased overall. There's now 2 different years where the city side may have gone down, the school side may have gone down, but overall it went up. I don't know how we do it without a CMP project and making a commitment. Trying to keep in mind the numbers we heard during the original budget presentation, where the GNP IPD is 2.2% and we're at 4.88. And I think that might have been the city only, not
No,
sure.
that's total.
That was total?
Yeah.
And now we're looking at a memo that says if we get 2% revenue sharing, it's at 3%. If we get the 2.5, which I think we will, it's at 1.7. Well, keeping in mind that I will not support a mill rate that exceeds the 2.2 GNP IPD, looking at this list of 13 positions, and I'll use the overall number, not the pared down ones that may have been conceded by department heads, but looking at the assistant fire chief, and not only the $123,000 salary with benefits, there's a vehicle that goes along with it for $41,000, for a total of $164,000. And then the planner, which if you go 216 plus the 41, you're at about did I say 116? 216 plus 41 would be about 257. That's already built into the budget. And I would have been more than happy to trade off the assistant fire chief for the rental registration components. I think looking at history and at a time when we had a retirement in the chief's position, an assistant fire chief who shot himself, and neither of those positions were there for a good 6 months. We functioned fine. I think we need a serious audit of the administration prior to funding an assistant fire chief. Just creates another layer of administration for some of the hoops that we've had to jump through in this year and even several years past. So that's where I'm at with that. When I voted, and I assumed everybody else was pretty much, that's where they were. Maybe some people are willing to move based on looking at the priority list and who were the 7s and who were the 4s and so forth. Kind of hope that there's some movement where there were 4s, because if we don't get to the 2.2, I'm not supporting it. I'm tired of seeing my neighbors pick up and leave this town. That is true attrition. And it's happening, and it'll continue to happen. And though I said earlier I don't like to compare with other municipalities, it was again recently said about Auburn, and Auburn's trying to make a commitment, although I hear that they're probably going to have some difficulty making that commitment for a zero tax increase. If they continue to do better than us on tax increases, they will continue to get the business locating there, the people locating there in their taxable properties, et cetera, and we will continue to receive the scraps. We need to compete with Auburn and compete tougher. That's what I have to say on that.
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
Just real quick. Councilor Marcotte, the GMP IPD is based upon the total expenditure increase, which is the 4.88% as the budget was presented. Are you looking at a tax rate increase or the total expenditure increase to match the GMP IPD?
Well, from what you're saying, the implementation of that requirement, is it called the cold trap amendment, by the way?
Yes, that's a cold trap amendment, is expenditure base only, and it includes the school department. But you kept saying the tax rate, so I just wanted to clarify if you were comfortable with the tax rate increase being at the GMP IPD, which is the 2.2.
Yes, I would be,
The tax rate.
the tax rate.
Thank you.
So if we can have a side-by-side comparison, because I didn't understand that was expenditure-based only.
It's expenditure-based only, which
Yeah,
is
and
what
that's-
makes it so difficult to qualify for it because the
Can we-
school's in it.
Can we initiate a repeal at the ballot box of that amendment?
I'd love to.
Yes, I mean, it's sometimes, a good example would be if we had that, well, a few years ago, when the school department received a huge amount of funding from the state, and still had to barely meet, it was just barely meeting the local required share, we were automatically well over the expenditure. So that whole system, particularly with the way school budgets have now been, to some extent, decoupled from municipal budgets under state law, it just doesn't work the way it used to. So at some point, when the Charter Review Commission is set up again, that whole system ought to be reevaluated. That would make some sense.
And to tell you the truth, I because of the confusing nature of that six letter acronym rather, I'd prefer something along the lines of what did the Social Security recipients receive for an increase this past year? That's the number I would not be comfortable of raising the mill rate. That might be higher or lower than this 2.2%. I'm not sure.
I think it's pretty much in that ballpark, as I recall. I don't remember. We can check and find
Those are the
out.
people that are going to feel the most pain when they get their tax bill in August.
Counselor Bean?
Although I did say that it's good to compare communities because it's good for us to know what's going on around us. I have to caution everyone not to try to emulate Auburn because as Auburn didn't have a very good transportation system last year because they didn't pay their share of the transportation. And I don't know, I guess they're planning to pay for next year, and they're going to increase the buses that serve their city. But until they do, they don't have the same service as Lewiston has. And it's really important to be able to have bus service to get people to work, and people really require that kind of service. And so what else? I mean, it's all about priorities. And I know that it's great to move somewhere where the taxes are lower, but are you going to get the same services? I don't know.
Counselor Lyson?
Yes, thank you. I just, wanted to thank my fellow counselors and yourself to go through this process, and it's not easy to do. And obviously, when somebody said all of these positions or projects are worthy to a certain extent, I believe that. And I know we've got some department heads here. I know how difficult it is sometimes not to be fully staffed and still to do the job and be expected to do the job. And I appreciate the work that people do at that level. Again, those positions that don't get funded, should not be a reflection on, each of those departments either as well. So, we're going to be facing some tough decisions. So I just wanted to say that, and I appreciate what people do in this city. I think we do great work with limited resources, and I would like that we were a richer community, and, a higher valuation, but I think we do great stuff with what we do, and I'm really encouraged in the future that, we're going to just even increase that a lot more, at least our livability, our sustainability, and, I think we do a good job budgeting. I mean, I think we've had some great presentations here about how mindful we've been, and I think the tax rate's only one measuring tool. I would love to be able to drop the tax rate. Who likes to pay new taxes? But if we're getting things from them, and if there's some things that are really need to be funded, I think it's, we have to look at the common good to a certain extent as well. And, that's what drives me is the health, welfare, and safety of the community. So, thanks.
So I know we talked a little bit about the list of service requests on page 18. I guess I would ask counselors to look at that between now and next Thursday and figure out a lot of this is duplication in the positions, I think, and there's the tablets on here, which we already talked about adding to the list. We've already talked about the bus service on the list. Everything else on here, I would not personally be in favor of adding back in. But we can have a more detailed conversation about that on Thursday, if that's okay with folks.
I think that'd be good.
Anything else? Oh, the one thing I just want to add is I want to thank Dale for being willing to forfeit some of those requests.
Are you new, by the way?
Good, all right.
Thank you.
Thank you.